Hi, I'm Erin Lucy, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my May wrap-up video. And sorry if the lighting is weird, it's been like really stormy every afternoon and it just gets so dark. So, cozying up, got my tea, and yeah, it was like thundering so much before, so hopefully it's not too loud. So, we will start. It was an overall decent reading month. I think I read 8 books. And we started with Untold Night and Day. Ah, yes. Great, my notes. This book is really hard to describe. It's essentially about this woman who works, where does she works at this theater for the blind. So it's this like audio theater. And it's her last day, and it just like is everything that unfolds in like the following night and day. It's very dreamlike, a little bit Murakami, but even more like whimsical, and it felt like I was in a dream the whole time. Everything's like very circular, very surreal, and yeah, it was really good though. I really liked it. It's just like, if you like that kind of thing, I feel like I can see why people wouldn't at the same time. So yes, I also really recommend like reading this one in one sitting because it's really easy probably to kind of lose the plot here because it's so like whimsical and dreamlike and surreal. So yeah, that was the first time I read Untold Night and Day, and these first 5 were all part of my vlog that I did, my week in the life, and then also like reading 5 books in a week. So that was the first one. And I don't even remember what the order is for these, so we'll just like go with whatever. Next we have Miss Ice Sandwich by Mieko Kawakami, whom I've wanted to read for a really long time. And I have Breasts and Eggs, but this one was like really short, a little novella. And it's about this boy who is kind of like idolizing or idealizing this woman who works at this like sandwich counter. She is like very interesting. I think she has like a blue eyelids. So she has like these things about her that are very like eccentric. And he is really intrigued by her and talks about her a lot. There's also this like friendship with this friend at school and his like dialogue and talking to her, both about Miss Ice Sandwich, the woman at the counter, and just in general. So I thought it was really good, really short, easy to read, and a good way to kind of get a feel for Mieko Kawakami, the author. So it's really short. It's like under 100 pages, like maybe 90 pages, and I just had a really good time reading it. So next we have Grievers by Adrienne Maree Brown, and this one is a post-apocalyptic pandemic novel, and it follows Dune, who her mother is like the first patient from this illness, and her mother dies pretty much right away. And it takes place in Detroit, and it's all about kind of like what happens once this pandemic starts, which they call H8. And I found it super interesting and intriguing, all about this like illness and about Dune's struggle for survival. It's also about her relationship, a little bit kind of about her relationship with her girlfriend and her family, and living in Detroit, kind of what that means, a lot about race, and yeah, it's really good. I highly recommend it. It is the first of 2, so I ended up getting the second one I have somewhere, which will be in my next book haul, and I'm hoping to read really soon because this was like probably my favorite. This, along with The Past is Red, it was my favorite that I read in like that week when I was reading 5 books in a week. So yeah, really good. Highly recommend this one. And I'm like surprised I haven't heard that much about this anywhere else. Yeah, okay, so next is The Past is Red by Catherynne Valente, which I really loved also. So this and Grievers were my favorites, and this is also post-apocalypse, and we don't really know what happened in the past. All that we know is like we're many, many years in the future, and everything on planet Earth is ocean. So there's no land, and these people live on the garbage patch in the ocean. And so everything surrounding it, they're living like in garbage, and everything is like kind of organized. So there's like these different areas with different places, like, you know, like all these candles, and then there's like this like place, I think it's called Electric City or something like that, where like a lot of the electronics are. So very strange and interesting concept. I was totally intrigued from the get-go by that, and there is like the most amazing twist that I love so much that I feel like really made this book for me. I won't say any more, but so good. Really enjoyed it. I kind of went into a deep dive after this in terms of like how the author came up with this story, which ends up being tied to this short story collection, which I'll talk about later. And so it was originally known as The Future is Blue. So I ended up getting this collection of short stories that are all by different authors, which I'm really excited to read because I think it's all in this like same vein. And I'm curious to also read the original short story from Catherynne Valente. But I was just like so intrigued by this, and it's so interesting because it is narrated by this character Tetley, I believe is her name. And she is completely ostracized because in the beginning she made this decision, which I won't go into details so I don't spoil it. She made this decision that everybody on the garbage patch, like they all hate her for. And so she's really pretty much hated by everyone. And so it's very interesting to read her thought process and her story. So I really, really enjoyed this one. Okay, and then we also have Skin Folk by Nalo Hopkinson. And this is a collection of short stories, which I also enjoyed. Short story collections are kind of hard because I feel like there's always like some that you like and some that you don't. And that's definitely how this was for me. There were a few that I really enjoyed, really interesting, sort of like mythology and interesting fantasy or like magical realism, mythological aspects to them. I will just like list a few of my favorites if I can find them. So one was Under Glass, and I also really enjoyed A Habit of Waste. There's also the last one called Precious, and they're all these just different stories that have these sort of, most of them have some sort of like fantastical element to them. So the last one, Precious, is about this girl who every time she speaks, coins or something comes out of her mouth, and it's really interesting and a lot to do with trauma. So there's also some really dark stories that I didn't really, not that I didn't love the dark stories, but there were also some stories that I didn't totally love and was a little disturbed by. But I think that that is also kind of the point of a lot of these. So I think in my video that I did on this, my like blog, I read this also, but I'll just do it again because I thought that it was really interesting. It's just like the first little part of this first story. Throughout the Caribbean, under different names, you'll find stories about people who aren't what they seem. Skin gives these skin folk their human shape. When the skin comes off, their true selves emerge. They may be owls, they may be vampiric balls of fire, and always, whatever the burden their skins bear, once they remove them, once they get under their own skins, they can fly. It seemed an apt metaphor to use for these stories collectively. So, I thought that was really nice. Then we had a couple of romances, contemporary. First, Happy Place, which I don't know what is going on here. Okay, first was Happy Place by Emily Henry, and Emily Henry is like probably the one contemporary romance author that I really like. Book Lovers is my favorite of hers. I really like them though. I've liked all of them, all the ones that she's written so far. So I read Happy Place, so that just came out I think at the end of April, and it's about Wynne and Harriet. They meet in undergrad in school together, and actually their whole friend group does. So there's 6 of them total, and Harriet and Wynn, I think, are the first like to become a couple, and everybody loves them and roots for them. There are essentially, it's dual timelines, so it goes back and forth between the present and when they like first meet and throughout their relationship. And those moments when they like meet in college, they're just so good. They're so good. The vibes, like you could feel it between them. Those were like really good. So essentially the whole premise of this is that they break up. And then 6 months later, they end up going to this like house that they all would vacation at, that one of the friends' parents has in Maine, I believe. And it is like Harriet's happy place. Like that's what she talks about it as. It's this place that she really loves where all her friends come together. But they're broken up, so Wynn finds an excuse like not to go. And right in the beginning, there's like a reason that he ends up going. And so they're like stuck together with their friends who don't know that they have broken up, which is like really key to the plot in this. So it's all about their relationship years later after they were together for a really long time. And gosh, I don't know how to talk about this one because I did not end up loving it. I really liked a lot of the character building. I liked the friendships. I liked that aspect of it. It was great. It was well written, like all of her books. So nothing to complain about there. However, I'm like really not a fan of the miscommunication trope. I feel like it can be done, like I'm fine with it if it's done in ways that like feel justifiable, which I guess is totally debatable, but, or like kind of on a small scale, you know, where things are maybe remedied pretty quickly. But this took it to like a whole new level. Like that felt like the main plot point in this. So that's kind of what led me to not like loving it, because that was like the main part of this, is like this huge miscommunication trope. Anyway, I don't want to like say anything more because I feel like it will spoil stuff, but I feel like that's like definitely, I wish I knew that going into it because I feel like my expectations would be a little bit different. Yeah, I just like really, in contemporary romance, like the miscommunication trope is just so hard because like to me, communication is like the foundation of relationships. And so I found this to be like really frustrating, especially when it translated to the friends, like the fact that like they're the best friends and like she didn't say anything. And I totally get like there are reasons, you know, like you can struggle with communication. They did, Emily Henry does deal a little bit with some mental illness in that, and I totally understand that, but I just like really personally do not like the miscommunication trope. And I felt like things were very like, it was like kind of ridiculous. And to me, their characters just like, I did not understand them. The whole comparison between when they first met as people, like it just did not, and their relationship, it just didn't make sense to me, like the current timeline and where they were mentally. So that was like it was like kind of sad because I was so excited and I love Emily Henry. And I still think it's like very well written and I very much respect Emily Henry. I will still read anything she writes, but this one just like did not really land for me. The other thing is also hard to say without any spoilers, but there's like kind of how everything wraps up at the end, which I'm not gonna say any details. I just like really didn't see it coming, and like not in like a necessarily like a good way. It just like almost felt like it was like thrown in at the last minute. And I felt like it might have been something that could have worked into the character throughout time. Yeah, that's like being really vague and not trying to say any spoilers, but I just like really struggled in this one with like multiple things, which was sad because writing again was really good. There were some really good moments, really good chemistry moments. So she still delivers on that side, just personally was not for me. So yeah, happy place. So the next one I also read on Kindle, in that it was after Happy Place because I think I liked the writing, but I was annoyed at the miscommunication thing, and I was like, okay, I want to try another romance. So I read Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. And this is like a normal person, famous person romance. It is also dual timeline, like something happened in the past and then they're like reconnecting in the future or in present day. Okay, so Cheney Horowitz, she is the journalist who is writing this piece about this actor, Gabe. And it's supposed to be about his upcoming role in a Bond film because he was like the unlikely choice cast for the role. Everyone thought it was gonna go to somebody else because he's very like he's kind of like a little bit country. Like I think his family's from Montana, which is really weird because there's also a Montana connection in Happy Place, but yeah. So they have this like weekend, or what turns it from one, like a short interview turns into like this whole weekend of adventure and interview. There is some miscommunication in this too, but it felt like less of like the main plot for me, probably because they just like had one weekend together, so it wasn't like based on this whole relationship. Anyway, so they like reconvene, they go separate ways after the weekend, and I won't say anything about that, but they like reconvene to do another interview years later because this interview goes super viral and it becomes like a huge deal. Everybody knows about it and always asks her about it in any interview she does. So, and same with Gabe. So yeah, funny you should ask. And I enjoyed this one a little bit more than Happy Place. Yeah, generally really liked it. So funny you should ask. One last book, and that is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. I love this one. This one's definitely up there this month. I think my 3 favorites were this and then these 2. So this one is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, and I had kind of seen it around, but I decided to pick it up in May, and it is about this woman, Amina al-Sirafi, and she is 10 years retired from being a pirate. A lot of times she doesn't really call herself a pirate, but she kind of lived this life of like sailing and adventuring with her friends, and she is kind of dragged into another adventure 10 years later. She has a kid and she's really reluctant to leave, but ends up agreeing to something. For very specific reasons, she essentially agrees to go find this woman's granddaughter because the granddaughter has been kidnapped and she has to go find her. And it's this whole adventure of her like getting her old crew back together, of her sailing on her ship, the Maree, which is, it's just like so adventurous, perfect for summer. The whole thing was really great. There's a lot of like history in it. There's like notes at the end by the author, which was Shannon Chakraborty, who did so much research, and that was so interesting to read about. And I would definitely will at some point be reading some of her recommendations. So I had such a good time reading this. I think it was just like so full of adventure, and I cannot wait for the next one. Thought it was so good. I think the only reason this wasn't like 5 stars for me, I had just had a couple of things that kind of didn't, or I think it was more just like I was a little bit confused by. So one of the things is like when you open, she is with her daughter and the rest of her family, and they're like really poor, which is just confusing given she already at that point has this like reputation that's like pretty strong for being like an amazing captain, Nakuda they're called, and she has this like notorious reputation. Like it sounds like they have like collected so much treasure over the years, and occasionally it's like mentioned that she's like very generous, so gives it to like everyone in her crew, but it just like didn't completely line up to me. I was like, that's so strange. Like she spent all like her career, you know, chasing treasure, getting treasure, and going on all these adventures, and then you open and she has no money. But it's also kind of what sets it up for like the reason she goes, like she agrees in the first place to go find this woman's granddaughter is because the reward is really huge and kind of sets the family up for life. But that just like didn't really add up to me. I didn't really understand that. Anyway, very small though, very small. I really overall really enjoyed it. There's a lot of really interesting aspects to it. The only other like small thing that I had with it is like beyond that first part, there were a couple other things that didn't totally make sense for like the characters to me. And there was one other thing, and it was really good, and it tackles a lot of really interesting things like religion and stuff like that. So this is one of the other things that kind of didn't completely, which I think is more just like, this is more just like an interesting conversation. But Amina al-Sirafi, she's like very religious and talks a lot about God, talks a lot about other people's God. and which I thought was like a really interesting aspect of it. But at the same time, she talks a lot about things that don't really line up with that religion. And it was just like slightly confusing. I almost wish it just had been like a little more dialogue, or like internal dialogue. Like there's like a tiny bit, but I wish that had been a little bit more fleshed out, because I think that would have been like a really interesting aspect of it. But at the same time, I feel like it tried to cover a lot of things, so I see why like that didn't become like an even bigger part of it. So anyway, really good though. Really loved this. I loved all the characters. I thought there were so many of them. It was so interesting. I love like the magical side of it too. It's not like, it is kind of a main part, but it's kind of like woven into like this reality, this kind of magical realism. But there are some pretty strong like fantasy aspects that I really enjoyed, and I will definitely be reading the rest when they come out. I kind of thought this was a standalone, but then it's definitely not. It's not like a cliffhanger at the end, but like I think it's gonna be a series from what I read. So very excited about that. All right, well, that was everything that I read in May. Great reading month. I feel like everything was pretty good. Not a ton of misses. I feel like the only one that was a miss, it was Happy Place, and that was really because I had really high expectations for it, and it just like used the tropes that personally I don't love. So overall really good though, and already having a good decent month in June. So yeah, all the good reading vibes. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.